Nick, Nick, what an absolute pleasure it is to have you on my channel. Um, I'm going to start with how we crossed paths.
What a wonderful story to begin with.
Yeah, I cannot believe it. So, guys, as you can see, I've got Nick Yarris on my channel. Definitely by far the biggest that I've done. Yeah, he's branching out, making himself at home. We ironically met through my work. He came in after a belt, and then I came after him basically, and I was like, hey, and yeah, here you are. Thank you so much for joining me.
It is strange how we can actually meet someone. And my perspective of it was I'm driving a 1992 Citroen high-low camper on New Year's Eve. The belt breaks on the M25, but I make it all the way to the Reading services, the M4. My friend Steven tells me, well, when the shops finally do it, because they were closed that night, they were going to be closed the next day. And the soonest that I could get a part was Thursday. So my friend Steven knows the area real well, and we had already gone to Euro Parts. And they told us that the part would be in the next day. But he said, look, there's a little place around the corner and they have belts. Maybe we can find the same measurement like you've been telling me. So I came in and I was telling you how I wanted a 10 by 650 belt to try and make it fit on my vehicle. And as we were leaving, I went outside in the van and I said to Steven, I said, shit, now we're going to just have to wait. And he said, hold on, did you leave something inside? And I'm on the passenger side. I can only see the commotion going on inside your business. And I said, no, I think I got everything. He said, well, did you steal something? I was like, no, I didn't steal anything. But there was three faces in the window. And I was like, I didn't steal anything. Honest. He said, all right, well, then I'll drive off. So then I looked on my phone about a half hour later and I saw this message where you just in the parts store. And I was like, oh, wow, that's what they wanted. So,
Yeah, and here we are.
right. So, all by chance, my vehicle breaks down. I spend the quietest New Year's of all time. No one's at the motor services because they're all out partying, right?
Yeah.
I didn't even hear fireworks. So I spent this great night there. The next day, like I said, I was running around trying to get parts and everything. And it's funny, I wasn't even supposed to have met you. And I damn sure wasn't going to find myself, of all days, doing this podcast with you because I wasn't even thinking about it. But I just finished a book. We were talking, and I thought, yes, like, why not? So here goes, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Nick Yarris, and I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I have the distinction of having spent 23 years on death row for a crime I didn't commit in the state of Pennsylvania, for which DNA exonerated me. So I was set free on January 16th, 2004. And that is going to be where this all begins. You see, the very first part of it was at 8:30 that morning, they told me I was gone. Like, I had the prison administrators and everyone, and they were very scared to look me in the face. It was strange. I was the first man in Pennsylvania's history to prove himself innocent with DNA testing results from death row. No longer was it an argument like, could they get it wrong? They got it wrong. And I think that they were kind of like sheepish and embarrassed, but at the same time, they couldn't believe that I just spent 8,057 days in the
Wow.
dungeons in solitary. I get in the van and we drive across the prison compound and they botched my release. They literally told me as we went through the first Sallyport gate and it closed behind me, and I could see my parents and the media outside the prison. We get to the next barrier and they said, we messed up. We made a mistake. We're so sorry. We, it's not us. They started saying, I'm saying, it is you. You said I was going home. So what happens is they take me back to the main prison and they told me that the paperwork in the state of Florida where I had escaped to in 1985 wasn't stamped. And I'm like, are you kidding me? By the time I was released 1:30 that day on January 16th, 2004, I didn't know how to deal with all this. Like it started to get bigger than me somehow. It was strange. I remember walking out and seeing my parents, because they didn't bother with a van the second time. They let me walk out the front doors. The press was demanding to know why this was all going haywire, so they didn't want to bother with it. My mother finally broke through the prison guards and hugged me. And when she did, I got hit with a blast of energy because no human hand outside of rubber gloves had touched me for the previous 15 years to that moment. I know, like I'm not ready for this.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the physical point of getting out of here, and I'm getting hit with all these things. And then my father, who was on the verge of tears, hugs me. And this is the second human being now. I'm getting hit by his energy, and it's so blue and so strained. His face looks so worn. And then I can see, it's crazy. There was a good friend of mine, and there was my ex-wife, a woman I met in prison, married me, and stayed married to me for 9 years before she left when all the evidence spilled and she thought it was over. But she was there too. And I had to deal with seeing my ex-wife, seeing my parents in this new form, and then walking up to the press and trying to say something. And I realized I was well out of my league to say anything clever. I knew that all I could honestly do in that moment was adopt a very humble posture and walk up to the media and say, there's 2 men in the prison behind me that are innocent. Someone needs to come and help them. And then I walked off. Like I called for a moratorium to have no more death penalty. I then got in a car driven by my ex-wife, Jackie, so that Pam Tucker, the woman who was driving my parents, could take us all to a nearby restaurant to try and get some food on this, because we had to drive from that prison 300 miles to Philadelphia to my parents' house that night. I'm thinking, this is just, wow. You can't believe what it's like to go from a tiny little cell out into the freezing cold world, and you no longer have cages blocking your vision. And the motion sickness that I was getting hit by was extraordinary. It was so powerful to be in like this still motion for months and months and months, and you're in a moving car. And the car was being driven by Jackie, my ex-wife. And I was looking at her and I was like, this is so cheap and empty because it's not the dream. When I met this woman, she was 32 years old. She was a psychiatric aide in a hospital outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, working with children who were badly abused. Intelligent, bright, witty, charming. I only met her because they were there conducting interviews about the abuses in my prison to try and get it shut down. And when they pulled me out to have a visit with me, I didn't complain about shit. I was well into my studies of psychology and reading books and all this stuff. I had 105 years plus the death penalty. I wasn't getting out. So I facetiously walked into the visit and I didn't have a complaint. And she fell in love with me. And we were together 9 years. And as she's driving this car, I'm thinking about all the things that happened with me. She married me with me wearing handcuffs and her wearing a wedding dress. And she went on television, like the Sally Jesse Raphael show, fighting for my innocence. She went to court for me. She helped me with my mom and everything. She was the glue that kept things going and contacting laboratories on my behalf. Because when I first met her, I refused to tell her I was innocent. I was so embarrassed that I put myself on death row by making up a stupid story trying to get out of original charges that were false. The police did me. They made it up for me to be the killer of a crime I never did. So I didn't want to tell a woman that. It was too embarrassing. I would have let her believe that I was a rapist murderer. It was so honest. I was so embarrassed by what I had done to my life. I didn't expect her to come back. And as she drove the car that day that I got out, I kept thinking about everything that happened. Her mother died of emphysema. She ended up with a house full of legal boxes, and she didn't feel it was ever going to end. And in 2002, all of the evidence spilled. No, 1998, I'm sorry. All the evidence spilled that was left from the case, they thought. And she told me she couldn't take it anymore. She left. And I wrote her this beautiful goodbye letter, and I'm sitting in the car next to her now. This is deep. We go to a restaurant nearby, and we sit down and try to eat, but I'm freaking out. Like, I just got the fuck off death row. I've just been in a cell for 23 years. I can't sit like a normal fucking person with cutlery and eat. This isn't going to work for me. But I'm trying my best. My parents need me to be sane. Like, I am very much aware. They're wondering, am I so fucked up from what just happened to me? Am I going to be okay? So I got to put on this very sincere facade of who I am. So I tried to lighten the mood. I ordered bread, and I told them how the only thing that kept me going in prison was bread, because it was the one food substance that I could eat, consistently, despite having illness or whatever. And then I launched into a story of my childhood where I used to give my father, who worked 2 jobs, a massage in between the both works. And the second job was of him being a baker. And he would bring me home rolls at night as a treat for doing that. So I tried my best to break it all up, but then I still couldn't eat. I ate some of the bread that was brought to the table. And then I told everybody, look, you're going to have to excuse me. I can't do this, man. I got to get the fuck out of here. I got to stand up. So I literally had to get out of the restaurant. And my dad saw what was going on with me, and he came with me. So we end up in the parking area of the restaurant called the Cracker Barrel. And he was looking at me like he was searching for some kind of glimpse of who I was. So he said, Nick, tell me what's different. Like, you ain't been out here for so long. Like, look around and tell me, like, what's so different? So I took a moment. I looked all the way around, and I said, I know what it is. And he said, what? Like, he was so eager. I said, hubcaps. Cars don't have hubcaps anymore, Poppy. And he looked, and he saw every car had alloy wheels, or if they weren't alloy, they're plastic covers, right? And he burst out laughing. I said, Poppy, you remember the old Buick with the bespoke hubcaps? And he said, son of a bitch, they stole the hubcaps. I didn't even notice. So I got in the car with my parents after an awkward goodbye with my ex-wife, Jackie, outside the restaurant. I didn't know what to say to her. Like, I tried to stay neutral this whole time because I still have a long way to go, man. See, one of the things a lot of people don't understand is over a prolonged period of someone in a family being incarcerated, a lot of shit on the outside happens. One of those things that happened was my little brother became a drug addict and an alcoholic. His name was Marty. And he died of a drug overdose in my parents' house. It was 2 years before that moment when I was released that he died. I knew that I had to go back to my parents' house with my older brother by a year and a half, having just been hit by an automobile. Now he's in the hospital as I was sitting there with my dad telling him about hubcaps. I know that the next morning, when my father has to go back to work, he's still 70 and he's still working. I got to go with my mom to the hospital and get my brother out of the hospital because no one could bring him home from the hospital while I was being released. My parents had to be in Pittsburgh. This is crazy. All this is on my first day so far. So I say goodbye to Jackie, and my parents and I, with this woman, Pam Tucker, driving, start the 300-mile journey to Philadelphia from Pittsburgh. The press is waiting at my house, and so is my family. The phone won't stop. I'm trying to look at my parents in the back. They're shrunken. They're so changed. Like, I can't believe this. And they held hands the whole time listening to the music on the radio and all that, and it just broke my heart. They were getting their son back. And I'm trying mentally to get this perspective together to handle all this shit because I had my botched release lead to me going up to the podium in front of the prison, speaking to the press, meeting my ex-wife, and all the empty dreams that I had with this woman got blown apart, and a reminder of it all. And then I got to remember how my brother dies of a drug overdose. And when I call home at that time, my sister hung the phone up on me. My second to my oldest sister hated me while I was in prison. And when she found out I was calling home to comfort my mother and father when my little brother died, she said, "Don't call this fucking house no more," and hung the phone up on me. But now that I'm being released, my mom's worried sick what's going to happen between me and my sister if she did that. So while we're driving, Pam and everybody needed a toilet. We stopped at the rest stop, and my sister called my mom on her mobile phone. And my mom is dealing with her, and I could see what's going on. My sister Anne Marie wanted to be at her house with the rest of my family when I got there. And she wanted to know, was it okay with my mom to ask me, was it okay with me, you know? And I thought, here's my first chance to reward my mom that her family's not so fucked up that everybody could be there and there's not going to be a skirmish, right? So I said, yeah, sure. I thought about it all, and I swallowed a lot of pain with that, you know? Okay, so we get down to Philadelphia, and because the Philadelphia Eagles football team was going to the championship that year, they had this crazy idea that if I showed up in front of my house wearing the team's baseball cap, the team would give me and my family free tickets. This is what they told me I had to do. So I snuck around back. Members of my family came out of an alley, gave me the cap. Then we drove back around like I just pulled up for the press. And we walked up on the front steps of my parents' house so that I could turn around and start speaking, surrounded with my family, you know? And then after they got to a point where they weren't comfortable letting me speak further, they all like pulled me back inside, and that was it. Like, it was weird. I didn't have the personality strong enough to deal with being handled like this. But like, I remember everybody's like, all right, that's enough, that's enough. And they canceled the rest of my press conference. So we all went inside, and my sister Anne Marie was up in the back bedroom. And she came down the steps, and everybody was on a guarded moment. And like, everybody knows something's about to happen. Everybody wants to see what the reaction is in the room, and everybody's like that. And I didn't want it to happen in front of everyone. So I went up the steps and met her halfway in the staircase, and we went up to the bedroom together. where I was going to sleep that night. And she went in and started getting herself together in front of the mirror that was in front of the dresser there. And I stood by the door and I said, Anne-Marie, you know, everybody is downstairs thinking that you and I are up here making everything okay. You know that's why we're here. And she said, oh, I know. But I just want you to know that since I've hated you for 20 years, I don't think I can stop. And I'm not going to make that effort. So when we go back downstairs, I just want you to know that that's how this is going to be. And I was at first really so respectful. I was like, oh, okay. So this is how it is out here. Like, people don't mind, you know? So I said, no, I'm not going to kick off. And then I'm not going to take any cheap shots at her for what she did when Marty died. If she doesn't think that she did anything wrong, then she's just explaining that she's going to keep hating me. I've had people hate me in prison for something I didn't do. I didn't care about it, you know? I just wanted to get through this day. Okay. So we go back downstairs, and the weirdest thing in my life happened. I got to see myself at the age of 42 for the first time in my life. I mean, really visually. Because after everybody was downstairs, they all started drinking and partying, and everyone was so aware of what a drunk I was that everybody was telling me I couldn't even have a sip, you know what I mean? While they were all drinking in front of me. So everybody's getting their groove on, drinking and getting high. And the news comes on at 10 o'clock. And everybody was so anxious for this. It was like a big buildup. That's why they all hung out, you know, because they're going to see Nikki and themselves on news, mostly themselves. And I saw everybody getting like all the chairs. And as soon as it got close to 10 o'clock, everybody wanted chairs in the living room, all close as possible to the television, right? And when they did that, like, I knew it was time to move. And I got as far the fuck away from everybody as I could against the back wall, and I sat down. And I could just like see the television like this between two people. And I waited, man. Now you have to understand, I didn't have a mirror in my cell because mirrors are weapons. I had a bolted on plate of metal that had been badly scratched on my wall. I didn't look at myself, and I didn't want to look at myself. So I had no clue who was outside of me. I just knew this voice, you know? And like a blind person being handed a pair of glasses for the first time, I looked on the screen of the television. I was freaked the fuck out by who that guy was. Some old man was standing there. I didn't age. I went to prison at the age of 20. Like, my life didn't progress through the 30s and stuff. I was so thrown off by it. Like, I got up, I waited, and everybody was like, all right, great, the 11 o'clock news is coming on. I'm like, we got to do this again. So, yeah, we ended up in a long table in my parents' dining room. And everybody was drunk by then. It was a different kind of conversation, you know what I mean? I had been hugged and touched so much that day. I had been getting to the point of nauseousness from being touched. And it was then that I started to talk to my father. And I said, I don't know if I can go do a press conference on Monday in front of my lawyer's offices, standing in front of 23 boxes of legal work, symbolizing the 23 years that I spent on death row. And I said, I don't like what I look like from the television, Poppy. I said, my hair's gone. I'm wearing prison eyeglasses, man. I look fucked up. And he was like, well, get a nice suit, you know, that'll help. And I said, well, maybe I could put on a hat, you know, because I don't like the fact I lost my hair. My sister Anne-Marie got so offended, she fucking laughed. She said, you're going to look like a fucking smacked ass wearing a fucking hat. I was like, oh, wow. That's your issue, that I'm going to embarrass you by wearing a hat because I lost my hair? my dad snapped out. He said, look, leave him the fuck alone. That's my son. You don't know what they did to him in there. And that was the first time in my life my father ever stood up for me. I'd always embarrassed him, right? So I'm like, fuck yeah. But at the same time, the crazy thing, after they started yelling at each other and shit, they picked up their drinks. They started moving on like it was going to be a non-moment. And I'm like, who didn't fucking get punched in the face and why not? Like, when you scream like that and yell like that, someone gets fucked up in prison. So I stood up. I was like, what? Like, I was actually going to ask, what, you're not going to fight? I literally was reacting to the anticlimactic part of the non-violence when verbal assaults in prison are always resolved with violence. There's no in-betweens, right? It was freaking me out. So I said, look, I can't do this. I stood up. I went downstairs in the basement. The door was right behind me. I went upstairs, and then I went out through the basement, and I stood by the back door with the back door open and listening to them leaving upstairs. And suddenly I had this overwhelming need to urinate. It was horrible. I couldn't stop peeing, and my head pressure was just banging so much. I had to put my head against the wall of the house to stop the pain in the front of my head from exploding. I told my father I couldn't go upstairs in the back bedroom and sleep. I was just going to stay in the basement, you know? So the first night of my freedom, after a blowout argument, I ended up sitting in my parents' basement all night, afraid to go to sleep. I kept going out back and looking up at the stars without no screens or metal over me because I didn't believe it was real. I'm thinking, how the fuck am I going to handle all this drunken mayhem around me and shit, and this dysfunctional mayhem, and hope to live? As I sat there, I had a liver that was so damaged, I was told by the medical staff before my release I had to have a liver transplant. I had a life expectancy of 3 years at that moment. And I'm thinking, if this ain't the most shit release ever to the most complex set of situations you can imagine, where I'm always going to be hated for the junkie that I was before I went to jail, for people who never saw me develop and grow in prison. They can't. They have blockers on. So just like I was shocked, they are so going to be shocked that I'm nothing like that at all, but on a different realm. I sat there all night trying to come up with an idea. I didn't want my life to end in misery being a junkie and a loser in Southwest Philadelphia in the ghetto where they have 500 murders a year. So I came up with the most ingenious idea that changed my life. See, people must have thought I was nuts taking on this huge persona-like effort to go speak around the world. But I had a choice, literally. I was going to be the victim of my circumstances, or I was going to come up with something so big it would get me out of there. So with the help of university students in Pennsylvania, I organized a 5-country speaking tour only 9 months after that moment. My first effort was to go and use trade embargo against Pennsylvania to make them give up the death penalty while I launched my speaking career. I thought it was brilliant. So I actually got to go to England first and address the lower house of a combined session of the House of Parliament. And I was so good in my presentation there. Former UN Secretary Kofi Annan, who was in attendance, came up to me personally and told me I was the finest speaker he'd ever heard, and I was just 10 months off of death row. And I knew I had some kind of gift. I knew all the torture, all the things that they put me through on death row was making me have a belief system I would never have had, and a desperation of such a dysfunctional beginning. I had no choice but to step out there. I went from England to Italy to Sweden, on through Spain, and then back again to Holland and France, and addressed to all these governments about taking Pennsylvania's trade benefits away from them until they gave the death penalty up, right? I went back to Southwest Philadelphia after I did this enormous tour, and I felt broken because there was no more excitement. There was nothing else to do. I'm back living where everything's broke down, you know? And now it's just before Christmas, 2004. And all I wanted all those years was to have a lovely Christmas home with my parents, didn't I, you know? And another crazy event happens. When I was in England, I went on This Morning with Philip Schofield and Nigella Lawson and all these people, and I promoted my speaking before Parliament, wearing a camouflage suit in tan. Oh my God, it was horrible. But a woman from the UK saw me on the program, and she had been visiting family over in New Jersey in December of that year, 2004, and she called me and said, "Look, we met when you spoke to Parliament, and do you remember me?" And I thought I did, you know. And she said, "Look, I'm going to come down to Philadelphia and meet you because I just find you fascinating, you know." So I end up having this amazing, like, day-long conversation of phone calls lead to her coming to a hotel. So her name's Karen, and she gets a hotel room in the Philadelphia area. And I go and meet her there at the hotel, and we spend all day talking, you know. And she told me that she had a high-flying job. She lived in England, and she had the ability to get me out of Philadelphia. What was I doing there? She saw me on stage. I was wasting my talents back here in the ghetto, like when I could be so much more, you know? And I believed her. And I accepted the fact that she said that she was just finishing with a partner. So it was all clear and cool. And all I had to do was just say yes, and she'd buy me an airplane ticket, and I could even come back and see my family for Christmas. She said, "Just come on over for a week." Like, it was like 18th? No, about the 12th, around the 12th of December, I remember, middle of December. I get on the plane, I say yes. I bought her a ring. I sold whatever I had left that I belong, you know, my belongings. And I told my mom I wanted to go over to England again and see if this thing would work. And she was like, "Go, Nikki, get out of here. It's so terrible here." I go to England, and Karen hadn't finished with her partner. He was still living in their house together, and she didn't even tell him she met me. She hid me in hotel rooms at first, and then she hid me at her parents' house in North London. And I'm thinking, this is fucking crazy. Meanwhile, this girl that I was dating back in Philadelphia named Mary was on the phone to her like an agony aunt. Like, "You ain't gonna believe this shit." Like, I thought I was getting out of the ghetto and getting away from all this madness. "You ain't gonna believe what happened to me." And I related to Mary what had happened, and I told her that Karen was with a famous musician's brother. And when I told her the musician's name, she knew he was black. This woman, Mary, out of spite, went to my parents' house at a big dinner before Christmas. And she started telling my parents in very vulgar terms in front of all these people, Karen was living with a nigger lover and now Nikki's with her.
God.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
As vulgar as it could be. Now, I don't know any of this. I swear. I'm being crucified back at my parents' house. And I think on December 21st, I get on a plane. I want to go see my parents and go get away from the stuff with Karen and living in her parents' house and being shuffled around. And she finally told the guy, and now we're going to be together. So she committing to this, right? And I'm feeling like so shaky. I go home, and my father meets me at the door, and he's like, "You ain't coming here." I was like, "What?" He said, you and that woman that you're with in England's fucked everything up. I said, what did I do? He said, oh, Mary came to the house and told us all how you're sleeping with a nigger lover. I said, oh, what? Like, I don't know anything, you know? So I was so embarrassed. I didn't even say anything. I literally walked away and I went and stayed at my friend's Vincent's house for a couple of days. And then on Christmas Eve, I went back to my parents' house because I bought my mom some nice treats from England and I got my dad some stuff. And I figured, fuck it, I'm going to go over and give them, I'm going to try and be the bigger person. They broke my heart with this bullshit. It's not my fault who Karen was with. And this woman shouldn't have done the shit she did. And it's all kind of spiteful shit, but why do I have to be eaten alive by it or join in with the same shit? So, no. I go to my parents' house and I told my father, look, I got some stuff in the basement. I'll just drop these presents off. I'll go down and sit down there and watch TV for a little while. I want to wait until at least Vincent get ready to go to bed so I can go back there. I'm sleeping on the sofa there. So when he goes upstairs, I at least have somewhere to sleep. Can I stay in the basement for a few hours? Yeah. So I was down there in the basement. I was watching TV. I was gathering up little things I wanted to take back to England with me. And then I went upstairs and my niece was up there and the house was empty. And I was like, damn, where'd everybody go? And she was like not wanting to talk to me. And I was like, babe, you know, trying to make contact with her eyes. And I was like, what's up? And she said, they all went to Anne Marie's house for a party and you're not invited. So they left you in the basement. I was like, fuck. So I got Karen on the phone back in England and woke her up. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning. I said, Karen, you got to do me a favor. I got my sister Anne Marie's address out of the phone book in my mom's front room. Can you guide me using the maps? Because back in 2004, we didn't have Google mapping like this, you know? All we had was like TomToms, you know? I said, I don't have a navigation ability, but you got to guide me over there because I want to go say goodbye to them, man. I'm not leaving like this, you know? So with Karen and an earpiece to me on my phone on a BlackBerry, I drove from my parents' house to my sister Anne Marie's. And just as I got to their house, my parents were leaving. So it was all set up so that they could get out of the way, you know? So I was just about to knock on the door when the door opened and my mom was there. She goes, Nikki. And I was like, hi, Mom. She goes, oh, you're here. Oh, why did you wait so long? I knew they did scammed her. She didn't know what was going on, you know? So she wouldn't have went along with that. So my dad comes out and he gives me stiff eyes because he was kind of like very much aware, you know. She goes, oh, you're here? I said, yeah, I'm just saying goodbye, Poppy. He ain't saying nothing. He goes, oh, okay, good. So I went in and everyone's acting jovial because, cat's out of the bag, you got busted. And everybody's kissing up to me. You know how they do when nobody wants you and you've been ditched? So it's fucking weird, man. But they're all high as fuck. So I go down in my sister's basement with all of them where the main party was. And they're all like, yo, look who's here. And they all think it's going to just be that. I was like, no, no, no. I only came here to just tell you something. Look, Karen's in the earpiece with me and the phone right now. I just wanted to let you know she's listening. And I didn't want to be ignorant like that. But she helped me come here by guiding me over. They're fucking amazing. She's on the phone in English. She told you how. I said, yeah. She read the maps and related to me how to find you all because I wanted to come here and say this is it. Like I'm done. Like I'm leaving. I'm gonna go be with Karen no matter what. And I'm not doing this. Like I just wanted to come and wish you well. Like I didn't want to be mean about it, but I wanted to stand up for myself, you know? I didn't want it to be dramatic. So I got back on the plane and I went back to England on like December 26th. And I was still staying at Karen's parents' house for a while. I felt so dirty. Here I was like moving into another creature's shell. And I I was going to be fucking his woman and playing with his dog and living in his house. And that was the best hopeful outcome from some shit that I already knew was another dysfunctional family. But I couldn't go back to Philly, man. I was stuck. I had to come in and keep going, right? So in January, I flew to New York City with Karen and we got married, standing next to a 17-year-old pregnant girl and other immigrants, so that I could come back to England and apply for a visa to live here, married to a UK national. I couldn't have possibly been in love with this woman. I only knew her a month. And it was funny. The whole time I was with her, one of the points she kept making is how I was never going to have any money and I was living off of her and all that empowerment. And it was really driving me nuts. So I was living in North London and I made a decision. I was going to somehow become a fantastic speaker, but it wasn't going to be aimed at Pennsylvania and that bullshit about trade and the death penalty. So I went down to Hyde Park Speaker's Corner. I had gotten a motorcycle initially because I didn't want to drive and change the steering wheel side and the road side together because it was a bit much. So no, I started off on a Kawasaki motorcycle, and when I learned all the road systems and felt comfortable, I started going into London and practicing my speaker in Hyde Park Speaker's Corner. And I was so good at it that a woman from Australia who was married to a man by the name of Glengarry told me I had to come on her husband's radio program because she couldn't believe what I was saying. I did the radio program with Glengarry in Australia, in Brisbane, and it came out and did so well. The BBC back here put me on Michael Burke's The Choice program, one of the biggest radio programs on BBC Radio 4, millions of listeners. I did a program with him that was so beautiful. It got a Sony Award nomination. It went crazy. They kept replaying it. No one could believe what they were hearing. And I got an offer for my first book. I got an offer for the movie documentary that would become The Fear of 13 to be made. I got a job working as a human rights spokesperson for a company here in England, in which I would go around to all the schools in this country and speak to children. All my dreams came true. It was wonderful. Karen got pregnant. We had a baby named Laura in 2006 on Easter Sunday. She was born in Watford General. I'm smashing it. I can't believe my efforts to go to Hyde Park and practice my beautiful speaking has smashed it so much that I'm going to the Globe Theater. And after Titus Andronicus was performed, Cleopatra would run backstage after telling the audience, give her a minute. She had a present for me, a gift, she would say. And she would go backstage and grab me by the hand and say, are you ready, rock star? And bring me out on stage. And I would get them to pass the buckets while speaking to them, raising money for charity of the year for that year at the Globe Theater, man. I was doing so well. I wrote my first book, 7 Days to Live. I was doing everything perfectly. And then everything in my life fell apart because me and Karen fell apart. And the diabolical things that just blew it all apart were extraordinarily unique. Postnatal depression, aggression, fighting, all those things. We split, and then I get arrested. I lose my book contract. I lose my film contract. I lose my job speaking for a human rights charity. I lost it all overnight. I lost millions upon millions of pounds. And the cruelest thing was Karen started using the courts to take my daughter from me next. So I haven't seen my daughter as I sit before you in 11 years. I paid for the most stupidest thing. A small amount of cannabis being grown in my garage is not a reason to raid my house, seize my assets, and pull a machine gun on me at Gatwick Airport. When I'm coming, this is the craziest thing. I was flying so high, I flew my parents from Philadelphia first class to Orlando, Florida to stay at the resort. I flew myself and my daughter, Laura, to Orlando to stay and meet my parents at the resort for a week-long celebration of my book, 7 Days to Live, to be released. 60,000 copies of the book have been released. I have a 22 language deal with my publisher. I am going to be a #1 bestseller. Everything's perfect. At the conclusion of that beautiful trip with my parents and my daughter, in which all that good happened, I landed in first class at Gatwick and got taken off the plane and met by armed security forces with a machine gun. Man, they took my daughter off me, told me to lay down and all that shit. I'm like, for what? Like, for what? Like, what did I do? They wouldn't tell me anything. They took me into custody. They seized my assets. And then my boss, who I was working for the human rights charity, had an OBE, and he had to have a letter written from him to the courts for my release. And it was upon his word that I was released, and then they dropped all the charges. But when they dropped all the charges 2 days later, guess what? My publisher canceled my book, and I lost everything. And it went from there from 2008 onwards. And so what happens? I get a house down on the South Coast near Hastings, and I have one macked out amazing summer with my daughter while Karen met someone new. God has a great sense of humor because his name is Nick. So fake that orgasm. And what happens? I go through the process of having the UK courts, which are very heavy-handed, against the male having any parental rights. In a very clever and devious effort by Karen, I lost contact with my daughter. So much so that eventually, after hundreds of thousands of pounds in legal fees and lawyers and all that, I gave up. I couldn't keep fighting it. I was fighting a lawsuit against my publisher, and paying that lawyers. I was fighting another lawsuit and custody battles for my child. And Karen got me $4 million. So, yeah, I was really not sure what to do. I ended up living in Amsterdam for a month. I ended up coming back here, buying a house in England, trying to reunite with Laura, and my older brother Mikey dies. And I don't know, I kept having this hope that I could stay here in England. So I moved up to Lincolnshire and I gave up speaking and everything. Fuck publishing, fuck plays, movies, everything. I literally gave everything up, and I got a job working for B&Q on their delivery system. And for 3 years, I didn't miss a day of work. I was with a girl named Jessie, and I lived up there, and we had a place up in Lincolnshire. And I thought, fuck it, it wasn't for me, you know what I mean? And then some bad shit happened because I got seriously injured on the job, and I now have a spinal cord injury from a pump truck that got away from me. And it had garden slabs on it. So I have the T1 and the C6 spinal disc shattered in my back, and I got trapped in impinged nerve roots. So I was pretty much out of it. And we had some friends that were close to us that took advantage of us badly. So Jesse and I decided we had to leave England, and we went to Los Angeles in 2014, just at the end of 13, December. We got married in Vegas. I gave her a surprise honeymoon in Hawaii. Didn't even know it was coming. You know what I mean? All the good shit. Spent $100,000 on IVF treatments, trying to have another baby, trying to replace what I lost. Got Jessie her green card. Nice job. And of all places, an English pub, where she meets a guy and tells me, I think I'm in love with two people and I don't want that, so I'm going to leave you. And to be fair, by the time you pass, I'll be in my 40s and it's not cool for someone as hot as me to be a widow in their 40s. So, yeah. And just when she left me in Los Angeles in 2015, the movie The Fear of 13 came out, and every woman in the world wanted to fuck me suddenly. It's crazy, I know. I left Jesse. I went back to our place where we were living in Los Angeles. I threw everything in the fireplace, and I took the 2 dogs, and I got into an RV, and I took a journey. Like, I got out of there, right? And then in February 2015, the movie came out over here in England, and it went wild. It was on BBC 4, Film 4, and over 1 million people watched it. So I got another offer from a new publisher. Republish your book for you, Nick. We'll just change the title to Countdown to Execution, Fear of 13. Oh my God. So I let a new publisher take over my book. I got my stage play offered to me. I got a movie deal offered to me for my life rights. And I have a chance to go and do speaking here in England. And in 2016, I met my current wife. And it was probably the most romantic shit that ever happened to me, actually. I was in Basingstoke, and I met her at a train station. And she heard me on the phone talking. And she said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Philadelphia." She goes, "Where are you going?" And I told her I was going out to Bristol to do the Bristol University speaking. She goes, "Well, I don't know where you're from, but I think I'd like to go where you're going." And she pulled me on the train station. So Laura and I started living together out in Ilchester, out near Yeovil, out near Stonehenge. And I was driving this little car around trying to develop this TV series called Dead Man Talking, which never took light. And I was working on the film deal about my rights. So I would stay out at Laura's, and I would go back and forth to Peterborough to friends that were actually taking care of me, you know. And I fell in love with her, and I had this wonderful romance going where she found out that she was still pregnant from her previous partner, and she had this beautiful baby named Jamie Lee in August of that year. And she was picture perfect little girl and everything. And today, in 2017, on this very date that I'm sitting here talking to you, she died in my arms of a SIDS death. So everything was perfect. I know I had achieved great heights with my new publisher. I took Laura on this beautiful romantic journey to Ireland, to Wales, to all these book festivals in Germany. And we even spoke before the Human Rights Council in Geneva with the baby in attendance. And everything was brilliant, right? And she comes back with me from Geneva, and she was sick with the flu. So Laura and I were laying on the sofa like that one, that kind of sofa that you're on. And I put the baby down, and I went back up to check on her 20 minutes later, and she was dead. And so I had to run downstairs with the baby in my arms screaming, and a neighbor came in and started with the CPR while we got the phone going, and the helicopter came, but it was too late. So it's a strange coincidence that I'm sitting here with you today of all days, but Jamie Lee passed, yeah. And it just blew everything apart. So Laura and I were dealing with Anthony Samandani from the Muhammad Ali Foundation, a beautiful Iranian man. And he's a lovely friend of mine. And Anthony secured my rights for a movie deal. And I took $100,000 advance from that. And I got Laura and her other 2 little girls out of that flat where the baby died. We got everything into a skip, and then we got suitcases for the little girl, and I went back to America to have the movie made. And I had all this opportunity because of the movie The Fear of 13, right? And this company in Canada offered me $25,000 plus all my expenses to drive from Los Angeles with my children and Laura all the way to Canada and then perform a week-long speaking between 2,000 of their employees, each of whom was going to buy a book by the company paying for it. And I was going to make like 100 grand for this amazing trip, a once in a lifetime trip, right? So we land in Los Angeles, and first things we do is we go to the park and we meet a Chinese couple and buy two little dogs, two little black dogs named Terry and Gina from the TV series Brooklyn Nine-Nine. So we got puppies for the dogs. I took Laura over to a plastic surgeon. I got her breast done, fixed that. I'm serious, like America is the shit, right? I want this girl to feel really good in a swimsuit because all she talked about, I ain't going to LA and getting in no swimsuit because all them girls got tits. I said, so will you. So I got her breast done. It was fucking amazing. And we bought an RV and used Facebook to find a 32-foot Fleetwood RV. And we put the kids in the RV. We took them to Disneyland. We took them to the Space Mountain and all these things. And we got rid of all that sorrow of the death of the baby, right? And everything's going wonderful. I mean, the kids loved it. They would wake up at the ocean, but the night before they fell asleep in the canyons listening to the coyotes while we did marshmallows. You know, we'd wake up at like 6 and they'd wake up, we're at the ocean, you know? So it was fantastic for two little girls under the age of 6, you know what I mean? And I saw that it was working. My friend Anthony went online, got a certificate from a Native American tribe to marry us and then perform the ceremony on the beach in Los Angeles. Laura and I are going to go up to Canada. We're going to make all this money. Everything's going to be perfect. We'll get through this storm, right? So we spent 2 months spoiling the kids. Like, America's so cool because over there, if you have a location, they will deliver whatever you want. I don't care if it's weed, food, beer, whatever. Like, they will deliver it to you on the street curb if you give them your location. So when we put the kids to sleep at night, we would order Chinese and have a Chinese, delivery route would come right to our van. And it was just so cool, So it started getting hot and we went up north and the gig was in September. We get to the border of Canada and they refuse to let us in. I swear to God, I spent 2 days at the border with lawyers, officials, official letters being written to the government of Canada, and they refused my entry because of my criminal convictions in the state of Florida for my escape. So I'm losing out on $100,000 at least in revenue. I've spent 15 grand of my own money. I'm not getting back now. They're not going to pay my expenses because I'm not doing the gig. And I'm stuck in Washington State, right next to the Canadian border. I look online and I found out that there was a house for rent in Oregon, 380 miles south of us. I put the kids in the car and we had a car and a tow box with us, left the RV in LA. And I drove down to Oregon and we rented a fully furnished house and we stayed there for the next 3 years. Like crazy. The kids went from being on this magical ride up and down the coast to waking up in a 4-bedroom, 4-acre house overlooking a beautiful mountain 2 miles from the Pacific Ocean, surrounded by a town of only 5,000 people. Perfect, idyllic. We got them enrolled in school. I went back to work on speaking. I got contracted to work for an education company. Everything was going to work, I thought, right? Still got it going. And then Laura and I started struggling with the PTSD and she started drinking more and more and it started getting bad, And then fucking COVID hits. We lose everything. People don't understand this. COVID wiped me out as a speaker. I couldn't go nowhere and do any speaking. My landlord was an 81-year-old alcoholic who didn't want to hear anything about this pandemic because Fox News told him it was all bullshit and he better get his money. And he used to come to the house with a gun because it's open carry. Wow. Yeah, I know. this is America for you. You know, Yosemite Sam, literally
It's
replica,
different.
right? He was the roughest, toughest, tootinest landlord ever. But I got kids in the house and they were witnesses. So Laura and I got a trailer loaned to us and we moved into the national forest with the kids, man. Got away from the plague, got away from everyone. And we ended up spending the whole summer on the river, and then we moved into the forest when the rains came and the river fled. And Laura was keeping us going by having a cleaning business, you know. So she would go into town and all that. And it was going on all through Christmas and all that. And then in the new year, 2021, Laura told me that she was taking the kids and leaving.
Oh,
So it was too hard for them being in the woods with us all, wasn't she? And she met someone through her work. So she was going to go live with this guy, take the kids. So I was stuck in the woods with a cat and 4 dogs. And everybody that was camping with us all started breaking up and leaving, and all started to change. And I got arrested for some shit that happened before the pandemic where a wealthy patron said I stole some of her paintings. Yeah, I look like I steal paintings. And I didn't. And even though the case would be reversed on appeal, I had to plead guilty to it to get out of that shit. So they made me go on probation for a while. This is so humiliating. My wife left me. Everything's gone fucked up. Then I meet a guy with cancer named Alex. We become good friends. And I ended up bouncing around job to job while Laura and the kids went back to England because she got all fucked up on drugs and drinking and shit. And she had to go back to England. We were no longer together. And this guy she was with was a fucking nightmare. So, yeah, how about that? I flipped my car over in 2022 while I was working on the equestrian farm. It was a nice job. Little handicapped children and shit on it. And I got another concussion. So while I was in prison, I had a lot of fights and sustained a lot of damage to my head. And I now have CTE brain damage, which is a degenerative cognitive attacking disease brought on by concussions. So at the end of 2022, I had my last of 9 brain scans, and I have a plaque buildup on my brain. So I can't be around violence. I can't be arguing. I have to stay very calm because if the plaque shakes loose, it can damage me. I can stroke out and shit like that. So I'm not allowed to do a lot of physical activities and shit. So I was stuck in Oregon, and I had just completed filming on a new documentary about post-release from prison called Life After Death, in which I drove across America. And in January of last year, my dog died in my arms on the same fucking beach that I got married to Laura by choking to death with my other dog getting caught on her collar. And I couldn't take it no more. I had to come back. I couldn't stay in America. This shit was driving me crazy. I just lost both my dogs because I had to give my dog Blue to my friend Noah, who came with a shovel to the beach so I could go bury my baby. I drove out in the desert. I buried my dog. I went back to Oregon. I gave away my RV. I gave away my car to a guy named Chris who was smoking meth all the way to the airport. Fuck it. I was getting out of there. I'm so honest. He smokes meth. So what? This is the life over there. I had to take over at times. When he went into a nod, he'd tell me, look, I need to sleep for 20 minutes and then I'll get back on behind the wheel. But I was so exhausted from driving across America, I didn't care. I got back to England, and my ex-wife, Karen, got my passport canceled on me. So I got stuck here initially with no documents. I'm trying to make a reunion with Laura, and it's going badly. I don't have anywhere to stay except for my father-in-law's house from Lincolnshire to stay on his sofa. I get a car given to me on credit by a guy named Nick up in Peterborough. And I start off trying to go and see Laura and see if it'll work, we can patch this up, because when you lose a child together like this, you have this trauma bond that is so deep. And I do love her and I care about her. I've been talking to her lately. I still care about this woman, no matter how complex it is. But then I went to see her at her work 2 days after my father died this year in 2023 that just passed. I turned 62 on May 17th, and then my dad died 2 days later. So I went to Laura's work, and she gave me a free cup of coffee from behind the bar where she was working, and it was on camera, and they fired her. So she starts hanging out with me more, and she got really sick, and we had this big fight in the car, and she had to go to the hospital because she was no longer able to pretend she was at work. Get it? She couldn't stay at the house. They would know she's not at work, and she couldn't stay with me because we had a fight. So she went to the hospital and she was nearly to death, man. That's how bad it was. So she's got a health condition right now that is threatening her life as I sit here before you. So I start trying to stay in the Reading area. My friend gave me a job working with him landscaping, and I was doing that back and forth. And I was carrying around all this sorrow and shit. I didn't know what to do. I tried to go up to Dublin and get a job up there, and I got taken for a wicked ride. But I did get to do something that was really important to me. I let go of all the sorrow of losing Jamie Lee by taking her ashes to the Trinity College where Laura and I once visited, and I loved that place. My brother Mikey's ashes are there. So I came back from there in November, beginning of December. And I was staying in Reading, and the people I was staying with had a stroke, and I couldn't stay there anymore. So I was bouncing around in my van between here and Bournemouth and back and forth to Reading, as best I can. And Christmas, I got really sick with the flu when I went up to Bournemouth after this friend of mine had the stroke. And I ended up having to go to Watford General and get a ventilator and all that because I was so sick, and IV and shit. The whole time I've been doing this, I've been finishing this brand new book called Mind Your Heart, Nick Yarris. I wanted to tell what it's like for the first 20 years of my life, which I've been sitting here doing, actually. This is the book I've been writing, sitting in my camper, bouncing around. I have the jacket designed. I have the book written. I've only done 150 pages because I don't want it to go on too long. Look, most people have a book about their lives that could be written, right? I've got 3. This will be another one. It's fantastic in its scope. I start with the very first day that I began with talking to you about, and I tell you how I was projected forward by all that pressure to go on with my life, creating the speaking persona and effort, because it was either that or be dead in that basement soon, I didn't step out here with a big ego. I was pushed. I wanted people to finally know that what happened to me was I had no choice but to go and do all this. And my settlement with Pennsylvania, people kept crucifying me that I got $4 million. I never got $4 million from Pennsylvania. My lawyers got $1 million off the top. And then I got the conversion rate of 1.9 against the US dollar at the time of 2008. Look it up. So I ended up with shit money, and then Karen demanded half of it. So I gave her $1 million to raise my daughter, Laura Rebecca, because she said the courts were going to take it off me anyway because we were married. So I didn't have a lot of the personal fortitude that I have now to stand up for myself back then. I was with Karen less than 3 years of my life, probably 2 years. And that's now 20 years ago. And in bitterness, she stalked me all this time, doing all kind of mischief. When my dog died last year, she got a recording of me telling someone about my dog dying and sent it to Laura to break her heart, my current wife, just to fuck with her. That's the shit I've been dealing with, right? Meanwhile, I try to rise above it and keep finding all these things like my friend Alex and make a documentary about him or do any kind of good that I can. All last year, I reached over 100 million people. That's incredible. From the Lad Bible to Drew Jordy to Sean Atwood to Dodge Woodall to all these others from Jimmy Rex, all of them. And as you know, that's how I've been surviving. People have actually reached into their pocket and gave me food money to keep me going because this is all real. This is how I've been surviving. I'm actually so proud that I sat here tonight. And in the context of my wife going back and forth to a hospital right now, the many losses that I've related to you all throughout this interview, and I'm still okay, man, mentally. Like meeting you and having the van broke down was just another event, you know? I'm so glad that the belt flew off of the car and that I got stuck at the motor services because whoever's watching this, whoever you reach, I know they really needed to hear this. And yes, it's all real. This is the crazy thing. I wish to God I was clever enough to make this shit up, you know?
I
But
know,
you can't.
right? You can't. You really can't. It's crazy. But everything happens for a reason, right?
Yeah, and I'm learning that so much. Look, something happened to me when I was in prison. I was so sick with hepatitis C and the treatments they gave me of interferon and ribavirin. I had some weird dreams when I was in stasis. And they were dreams of me as an advanced person, not as I knew myself to be. And then they started happening when I got out. Little ones, like at first, like I was standing in front of my house, my father's house with Jesse, who was my partner then. And I said to her, there's going to be a car wreck right in front of the house. Watch this. And a police car turned on its blues and twos and started shooting up the street while a learner driver was going past us and making a left turn. And they collided just like I said it would. And then I told that same girl, I said, this is strange. Me, you, and your sister's going to be in a car, but she's going to be behind me on the right, but I'm driving. But we're here in England. And she said, how's that possible? She attended a conference with us in Oregon, and she ended up being in the car behind us when a near wreck happened in front of us. And I turned to Jessie, I said, this is just like that dream. And she said, son of a bitch. So I've had those kind of ones, but then they got more and more detailed too. And it's really eerie how you can go through so much suffering and medical sickness. You can almost be like a Nostradamus where you get glimpses of things in dreams that then unfold. And then top it off with all of how I'm affected by energy. It's so strange. At first, when people first were hugging me when I first got out, I was getting blown away. But then I started projecting. Whenever I walk off stage, I can wow people with a touch. Like I've had my partners go crazy because of what was going on with us sexually, but I meant emanating of energy was so pronounced. I could shock people and stuff too as well. Fascinating. And it goes back to that study of the Brazilian orphans where they took 100 of them, split them in half. 50 of them were cradled and nourished and held, and 50 of them weren't. The 50 that weren't withered and didn't develop and had all kind of fucked up brain trauma. The ones that were held developed. And I think as an adult going through a 15-year period of no human hand touching me caused some kind of reaction with me, a super antenna-like ability to absorb energy like no one else. Fascinating to me. For those of you listening, there's a little French bulldog in the background growling like me. I love it. The best studio quality. So here we are. 20 years, on January 16th, 2024, I will have been a free person. And before we spoke, we both identified with a truth. Because you know that the last 3 years of your life, following 3 years of your own incarceration, were harder than the 3 years you did. And you know what I mean when I'm telling you the last 20 years of my life overwhelmingly were harder than the last 20 years before that on death row.
Oh, 100%. I mean, okay, so to start with, I can't imagine what it must have been like to be on death row, knowing you're not guilty, to literally, I don't even know how tough it was for you out there, because I know it's a whole different world. But I know that, you know, for me coming out here, and I say it, it's tough. It took me, you know, nearly over 2 years to even start finding my feet, and I've not quite been out three years now. So everything you're talking, it's like I was feeling it. You know, I literally could feel everything you went through, what you just said then, because I know it's so real and it's so intense. You come out, the day you come out, just, you know, you think it's gonna, my expectation was amazing. I'm gonna see my family, it's gonna be great, you know, I'm gonna have this freedom. And it's like,
reality's a punch in the gut.
I went to my old man's, and, you know, and it was like giving me a hard time straight away on my first day. And I'm like, I've just got out, Dad. Yeah, well, you're not going to do it again. You're not going to go back. Da, 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 you know, and it's like, straight away I was like, bang. I fell flat on my face, and I was like, this is not how I pictured it.
What everyone sees on television is like, when Andrew got out here in England from up in Manchester for the conviction of rape, everyone sees this guy getting out of prison and they think it's over. Like, they got this sensation that, oh, thank God it's over for that man, or, oh my God, he's gotten something back.
Yeah.
That's the biggest lie. A, you're not getting anything back from your old life. B, it's not over. It's just the beginning again. So you either pick up on track of where you were and back where you were, or it's this new realm of after everybody knows what you've been through. And it's the weirdest part, because now you're carrying something new and everybody's got shit to say about you because of the internet now. It's fascinating. In jail, you notice, you don't talk about someone's religion, you don't talk about their family or what got them in jail, right? You stay out of their business, right? Or what happens? You get stabbed up, you get beaten down, right? But out here, it's the complete opposite. Everyone will get in your face and tell you about your religion being bullshit. They will talk about your family, and then they will put you down for while you're there. It's a complete extrovert.
It's a different world.
Yeah. When I grew up, we used to have to, like, on bent toes, listening to the older boys talk, because we wanted to know what they were talking about, because they guarded their opinions. Like, what they talked about was super cool, and we weren't in on it unless we were allowed to listen. Like, and now everyone broadcasts it, don't they?
Yeah.
And it's such a shame, because all right, think about it this way. Little girls, especially, used to have a diary. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And what did they do? They talked to themselves in empowering ways so that they could build themselves up without criticism from their diaries and their journals and stuff. Yeah. And that's all gone. And now they put it out online and then are attacked for it, or they don't even have the sense to talk to themselves in those empowering ways anymore.
No.
It's a complete thing. We're like the last couple of crops of human beings before the internet.
Yeah.
I didn't exist on any computer before I got out of prison.
Oh, wow.
I had to use the front page of the newspaper in Philadelphia to go down to the DMV to prove who I was, because I didn't even have a copy of my birth certificate available. And they took as proof me being on the front page of the previous day's newspaper to give me an identification card so that I could get on a train to go to New York City because you couldn't ride a train in America without ID. You couldn't get on the national rail system.
Yeah.
A local bus or a tram, yeah, but not the national trains. So I had this picture of myself. When I first got out, my skin was bleached white and I barely fit into my t-shirt. I was so sick. And within 6 months of my release, I had a blessing that my health changed and my hepatitis went completely away and I was healthy. I know. Sitting in my parents' basement, I didn't have time to cry about it all. I knew I had to try something.
Yeah.
I didn't choose this life as a speaker. I didn't choose this effort to go out and be this glorious personality. This was my one way of not being overwhelmed. I'd be free. Isn't that crazy?
It's crazy.
I'm so glad we met because you get this. Because it's so hard to relate to the average person who hasn't been incarcerated what your perspective becomes.
But they just think that you should be happy. You should be ecstatic. You got your life back. You're free. You're this, you're that. But no one understands any. I mean, again, my sentence compared to yours, I don't even. You might have to just tell me a little story. I know I might be pushed on time a little bit, but I've got 2 questions before I cough. But I spent the last year of my sentence in COVID. So when I came out, I didn't even realise straight away, but the anxiety, everything, I was affected by that. So I had trauma there.
Yep.
Because I was working outside the prison. I was working in a hotel. I was staying at home once a month for 4 nights, 5 days. I had my phone when I was at work. So I had a huge amount of freedom. COVID comes, bang, you're locked in the jail, no visits, 10-minute phone call a day,
And it was spreading in the jails like wild.
We was not too bad.
America, it was bad. The pregnant women and stuff were dying of it. It was bad. That's when I got arrested too, in Oregon. So yeah, it was terrible to go from that situation you had to lockdown, because where I was in the woods. I was free. Totally different.
Yeah. But yeah, so just everybody just literally just doesn't realise, no one that's been incarcerated, they think that you're supposed to be ecstatic, and it's not.
That's
and it's
initial.
not that easy.
But they don't understand rebuilding your life. All right, what they don't get too, how many bad bridges do you have to recross to go reconnect with people when you fucked up? Back to that time, all they're holding on to is what happened. They don't know what you went through in jail and all the times you had to be stripped and you had to go through the degradations of being like put through the rigmarole. They just saw you then and they're holding on to that shit from then. And now you got to go bad bridge jumping. And that was the worst thing. Mine was so complex though. Everybody in my neighborhood fled during white flight from the crack epidemic. When I went to prison, my neighborhood was 90%, 96% white. When I got out, it was 96% black. My family was the only white family on that block.
Oh, so yeah, it changed.
I didn't know anyone.
Yeah.
So the only bad visits I had over those bad bridges was family. And they were holding on to me from when I was a 17, 19-year-old junkie when I went to prison. Not fair. No. But you get this. The last time you saw someone before you went to jail, they still held on to that.
Yeah, it's even my old man now. He says, I was like, even if I think it's 2 years later, so I come out, and I was like, do you believe me now I've changed? And he's like, I'll believe you when I'm dead. I still love you.
But from their perspective, they have no idea what you developed through.
Yeah, the work I'd done on myself.
So what was your second question?
You mentioned escape. I mean, so maybe anybody that doesn't know your story that's watching this channel, you escaped from prison.
The craziest story ever. In 1987, my lawyer filed, 1982, I get sentenced to death. My first appellate lawyer was appointed for me, and he filed my appeal. My appeal went to the state Supreme Court, and they sent my case back to the trial court for all these hearings for the abuse of evidence and the missing evidence, because initially the man described as being the attacker that eyewitness saw was 5'6", 5'7", with dark brown greasy hair. I'm 6'2", blonde hair. But all of that evidence of previous person being identified was hidden along with the killer's gloves that were left at the crime scene and other items. So I'm on my way back to court. I'm in a car with two sheriffs, and it's February 15th, 1985, the coldest night of the year. The ground's frozen solid and everything's covered in snow. We drive 5 hours from Huntington, Pennsylvania down to the prison where I'm going to be housed for court. And I'm excited as shit to go to court. I'm getting a new trial. They found all the evidence is missing. I got 33 pages of the homicide file, never turned over to my lawyers. All kind of stuff. Look, I didn't do it. Of course they were going to hide the evidence. We stopped to use the restroom. And when we did, I had prison eyeglasses on. And when I went into the toilet, being escorted by one officer while the other one sat back by the car and had a cigarette, I went into the cubicle and my eyeglasses fogged up and I'm peeing. Now, I'm breathing and it's getting worse. Can't see shit. Turn around, come back to the officer who was holding the door, the top of the door, and I went under his arm, thinking he's now going to take me back to the car. He was standing there knocking knees because he's got to piss so bad. He went to go take a piss and he thought, just like this, push me on my way and I go to the car. I'm going back to the car with my head down and everything's in fog. Look, I came out of the warm toilet. I'm telling you, I can't see shit. But I'm coming to this officer and I got my head down. I didn't know he had his back to me and he was smoking a cigarette and he didn't see me come out of the bathroom. But he turns around and it's like, oh shit, I'm right on him. He thought I overpowered his partner. He pulled his gun out and fired a shot. So when he fired the shot, I went, whoa, like this, turned around and started running, and I got handcuffs on. So I can't get my legs right. And I went down when he fired the second shot and I ripped all the skin off my hands. I jumped up and I started running to the big plate glass windows of this Ponderosa restaurant, it's called, thinking he can't shoot me and not risk hitting one of these people. So I ran like right in the middle of the restaurant, like running right at it. And he's behind me, he's yelling, stop, stop. And I ran around the restaurant and I went down about 100 yards and I turned right another 100 yards. Then I turned right again and I came back and I was hiding behind their patrol car in the grass. And I laid about 20 yards behind their patrol car while they were screaming at each other how fucked up this was. Oh my God, we're going to get fired, all this shit. I'm laying there vomiting in the grass because I got all this adrenaline pumping through me. And I can't stop hyperventilating. So I was like I can't believe what's going on. Look, man, he fired that shot so fast. I felt the percussion. You know what I mean? So when this shit happens to you, your body goes into shock. So I took my eyeglasses off and I picked the handcuffs and I took the handcuffs off and put them in my pocket. And I saw a flag. And that usually symbolizes a municipal building like the police station. So I crawled in my belly all the way there and I hid there for a while. I stayed there for about an hour until I lost my core temperature of my body because it was below freezing. All I got on is prison shoes, prison trousers, and a prison shirt. That's it. So I get out of the back of the police station and someone in the building saw me and they called in a helicopter and started chasing me for the next 3 hours. Like it was wicked. Oh my God. But the thing was, every time he came down on top of me with the helicopter, the snow was blasting up so much he was losing me. So he'd back off. And his FLIR, the forward-looking infrared camera, wasn't working because it froze over. Oh, wow. So he had a million candle white light on me, man. It was like unbelievable. And I would be like in a big giant car park going across and he would come down on me and oh my God. And it went on and on. And at one point, I only got away by luck because the snow plows had pushed snow up against this big fence I was running towards. There was a gap at the bottom I didn't see. And I thought I'd have to run up this big mound of snow, then jump on the fence and make my way over, hopefully. No, I slid on my face straight down. And I don't know how I didn't get hurt. I slid about 200 yards down an embankment to a set of railroad tracks, and I laid still in the bottom of the snow, and the helicopter went over me a couple times. And then I got up and shook all the snow off me, and I started walking on the railroad tracks, and I got away. I did. I walked 5 miles on those railroad tracks to Fraser, Pennsylvania, and I stole a 1965 Ford Mustang, and I drove to New York City.
She didn't even plan to escape.
I didn't want to escape. I'm going to get a new trial.
Yeah, when you said that you was like all excited, I was thinking, why did he escape then?
Yeah.
So
why run? No, because a dude that had a cigarette in his mouth turned around and thought I overpowered his partner, who didn't want to piss himself because he stood there listening to me going to the toilet in the urinal. It's all, you can't even make it up. Like, it's too crazy. And he blasted at me twice too. That's what bothered me. So I was on the run for 25 days, and I turned myself in the state of Florida. They couldn't believe I was turning myself in. Like, they kept asking me, like, why do you keep running? It's like, you know how fucking hard it is to run from the FBI. And like, every cop had a shoot to kill order. I escaped from death row. It was shoot on sight. It's not throw handcuffs on this guy. You get this? It's death. I was 24 years old. So they put me on death row in Florida. I spent 7 months there next to asshole Ted Bundy. Then they sent me back to Pennsylvania and gave me 35 more years. So when I met Jackie, the woman I would meet outside of the prison that day, I never thought I was getting out. And I never thought any woman would fancy me. I looked so horrible after the beating. So they got me for the escape. They got me good. They waited a year and then they beat my face in. So it's a strange, circuitous, almost nearly beautiful way my life has unfolded. It's had so many tragedies, from dead babies in my arms and being shot at and all this craziness. But there's been so many amazing, beautiful moments too. I'll never forget standing before the Human Rights Council and getting standing ovation. I'll never take away from myself being on stage. I walked up onto the podium stage at the Coliseum after an actor had beautifully read The Executioner, the poem by Leo Tolstoy. And then me in a beautiful black suit walked up on stage, and children who were holding boxes let doves out behind me. And I walked up to the microphone in a dreamlike sequence with 20 fucking thousand people there. And I spoke before all of them. And when I finished speaking, I turned around and I disappeared into the night, and I didn't hang out with them afterwards, man. That was one of the greatest nights of my life, man.
No one can take that from you either.
No one can take that from me. I was living in the villa of Thomas Cahill, the man who had written the satire, How the Irish Saved Civilization. It's all real. He has a house in Rome, and he's part of the Santa Egidia community. And when Italy was celebrating getting rid of the death penalty, they invited me to be the representation of a man set free from death row who was now happy. And I did it. I smashed it.
Amazing.
So I look for it this way. Right now, as I sit before you, I just completed a beautiful book that I've tried to encapsulate speaking here tonight about. I have a brand new documentary coming out about my friend called Why Don't You Just Kill Yourself? A brilliant documentary about his cancer journey. I have another documentary about myself coming out that I mentioned about driving across America. And I have my efforts with my movie rights to still go forward with Alejandro Monteverdi. He's the director from The Sound of Freedom, the big movie. So I know one thing. I didn't get here by happenstance. I had to have met you for a reason. Now there's someone who's going to listen to this that believes that. Let's wait for the one, yeah. Thank you for inviting me onto your podcast. And it was extremely gracious of you to let me sit here and basically tell all this to someone who deliberately didn't fill their minds with it on the internet and let me hit you right in time with it. So this feels kind of appropriate that we end here knowing that it all was meant to be that I met you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nick. I am so grateful, and yeah, I really felt your journey of coming out. Yeah, honestly did,
The
and
one person I needed to tell the story to was someone who experienced this. Now that I finished this book, because it starts with my first day. It's incredible.
well, we'll all be looking forward to seeing your documentary, your book. So
Yeah. I have a really good chance for 2024 to be stabilizing. And all I really want is the ability to take care of myself. I don't want much. I figured it out. I couldn't have met you had I lived in a mansion. I couldn't have met you and had the bond that you and I had, like when I was at your work and we had a nice hug.
Yeah.
I couldn't have had that if I had things smashed.
Yeah.
And I'm realizing that's where all my gifts come from. Because there's 1,000 Alexes in my life that came through. They've either gone through divorce or drugs or loss, and they didn't know how to handle shit. And then they meet me, and then they're cool. I love that. So it isn't easy, but it's rewarding. And I'm telling you, I don't know what your struggles in life are, anyone who watches this podcast, but if you count your blessings as equally as you count the hardship, then you'll see that it's more fair than not. So it's down to you to just, rip yourself up over it. You and me, we know better.
Amen.
Amen.